Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Holy Trinity. I'm Catherine Cobb, and I have the pleasure of leading this institution along with a wonderful staff and amazing students. And we're very glad you're here this evening. Many of you know that Holy Trinity is a college preparatory school, and our faculty work very hard, day in, day out, to prepare our students for college and life beyond. But the academic preparation is just one large part of it, but it's only one facet of the whole process of being admitted into the college of your choice. So, and as many of you know, you have older children who may have gone through the process, or you're just now learning about the process. It could be very daunting, anxiety-ridden, and full of the unknown. So here at Holy Trinity, we have a college counseling staff that really likes to walk this journey not only with the students, but with their parents as well. And we look at each individual student and help them to put their best foot forward when they apply for college admission. And as hard as we work, there are still so many unknowns, and this evening will be an opportunity for you to actually talk to the experts about college admission and what they're looking for, so that you too can help your child put his or her best foot forward. So we hope you enjoy this evening. We hope you find it productive and interesting. And it's my pleasure to introduce Melissa Uzier, who will then introduce the panel and how we will operate tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Staub. Thank you so much for coming out on a Tuesday evening. We really, really appreciate you being here, and we'd like to welcome our panel. And just to give you an idea of what we're going to kind of process through this evening, we'll do introductions, and each one of our panelists will kind of just give a little opening, and then we're going to start straight into the questions. We'll start with the questions that you guys wrote down when you walked in, and then before the end of the evening, we are going to also bring a microphone down to you. So if there's any follow-up questions that you may have, we'll have that opportunity. But I'd like to introduce Charles Murphy of the University of Florida. He is the Director of Freshman and International Admissions at the University of Florida, and active quite often. We saw him at the FCI's, the Florida Council of Independent Schools convention, answering questions very similar to the ones we'll be asking tonight, so we've vetted him already. We also have Maria Furtado from Colleges That Change Lives, which is a nonprofit that is dedicated to the advancement and support of a student-centered college process, so a very unique person to have onto the panel, so thank you. And then we have Rick Clark of Georgia Institute of Technology. He is their Director of Admissions and also author of several books and a relatively popular blog within the admissions and college counseling world. So I'm just going to let y'all open it up and say what you'd like to say, and then we'll start with the questions.
So, Mike, yeah? Can you hear me?
2 seconds.
Yes. Okay, good. Okay, great. So again, my name is Charles Murphy. I'm the Director of Freshman International Admission at the University of Florida. So I just want to maybe talk just a little bit about maybe my role at UF and what I do, and maybe give you some unsolicited advice about the college search process. So at the University of Florida, I oversee sort of our freshman recruitment process. And at the University of Florida, you may have heard of us. We're a little campus a little bit north of here, a little over 50,000 students on our campus. About 36,000 of those students are undergraduates. So we have a pretty large applicant pool, and we have roughly 6,600 students who are in our freshman class. One thing, although probably a lot of this session will be focused on freshman admissions, which is great, but it's also important to remember for UF and a lot of other schools, we also have a lot of transfer students. We take in, depending on the year, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 transfer students over the course of the year as well. So we also have a lot of students who are coming, especially from the state college system in the state of Florida. One thing that I'll plug, as you may not know, or maybe you do know as a benefit, one of the great things about the state of Florida is that we have a common course numbering system for our courses for lower division courses. So if you find a course number at your local state college or at UF or UCF or wherever, it's going to be the same course number at every campus, so you have a very clear idea of how your courses transfer. So we take a lot of students after they've completed their AA at a State College of Florida campus. So again, I know a lot of this nights probably focus on the freshman process, but I also wanted to sort of give a little bit of plug to our Florida State College system, and also the transfer process to all the state institutions across the state. So probably the most common question that we get is about the admission process itself. You know, how do you apply? What do you need to get into Florida? And I'll take maybe 1 minute or so just to talk a little bit about the holistic admissions process, because that's a process that we use at the University of Florida. It's a process that varies by school, certainly, and maybe Rick will add his thoughts about how it looks at Georgia Tech. But what we're going to look at in the admissions process, first and foremost, is academics. That's where we're going to start, and that's where most colleges and universities are going to start when they review your application. We're looking at a variety of things. A lot of students ask, what GPA do I need? And certainly we have GPAs, we have that information on our website. But we are looking deeper than just the GPA. We're looking at course schedules. We're looking at how many years of core courses did you take, what type of courses, honors, AP, International Baccalaureate, dual enrollment, wherever it might be at your high school. And we're also looking at things like grade trends. You know, did your grades improve throughout high school? Were you a steady performer? Do you have areas of relative strength or weakness? You know, I'm really strong in STEM areas, but not as strong in social sciences and humanities, or vice versa. So while the GPA can give you some good information about how competitive a college or university is, we're looking deeper than the GPA and looking at all of those factors when we're evaluating the student, how they've done in high school. Most colleges, well, maybe that's not fair to say, but many colleges and universities will also look at your test score, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about test optional admission. But the University of Florida and all the state of Florida schools, you do need to supply either an SAT or an ACT score. I will tell you, UF and probably the other 11 state institutions in Florida, your high school performance is going to be more important than your test score, but we wouldn't ask for your test score and we wouldn't require it if we didn't look at it. So it's not that we ignore it, but sometimes people get very fixated on that test score, which again is part of the process, but it's certainly not the whole process. And then the last part that we look at is really the non-academic parts of the application. So for the University of Florida, we ask you to submit information about your activities outside of the classroom, and we ask you to submit an essay with your application. And so we evaluate those things. We're looking for students who have involvement outside of the classroom, whatever that might be. That could be volunteer work, that could be through a school or religious or community organization. That could be through work, having a job. That can even be, family responsibilities. There's a question on our application about those types of things. So if you help care for a younger sibling or a family member or a grandparent or something like that, those are contributions that are important for us to know that you're actively involved and engaged in some way outside of the classroom. But really, this is where my first piece of unsolicited advice comes. Be involved in things that you are passionate about, you're interested in, you want to do, that help and support your family. Don't just do things because you think it will look good on a college application. Because you're going to be more excited about doing those things if you're actually interested in them, and that's actually going to come through on the application. That, it's great if you volunteered for 2 hours in this one event one time and then did this, for 6 hours this one time. But if you do consistent involvement, you're continuously with a sport or an activity or whatever it is that you're interested in, that's something that often stands out in the admissions process. And then one question we get asked a lot, which I'll maybe head off a little bit, is we do not take letters of recommendation. Many colleges and universities may require letters of recommendation, but that's not something that we consider in our process. So we talk to students about being self-advocates in the application because we're not hearing from a counselor or a teacher in that application review process. So you have to sort of brag about yourself a little bit, and that's okay. Again, tell us those things that you're interested in. Tell us something in that essay that we can't glean from other parts of the application, about a passion you have, about an interest, or how you've changed, or how your thinking's changed. If you look at our essay prompts, which are available online, a lot of them are how things impacted you in either what you've done or how you think about a certain problem or issue or things that have impacted your life. And so really try to give us insight on those things when you're answering those questions. And And then the last piece of advice I'll give before I hand the virtual microphone over is, while obviously tonight is focused on the college admissions process, and I maybe should have started with this question, I'm going to assume many of you are juniors by show of hands, or parents of juniors. All right, yeah, so most of the room, maybe any sophomore, freshmen. All right, a few of those. Any seniors? A few seniors in the back, yeah. So wherever you are in the process, whether you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, don't forget that high school experience is not the college application process experience. It is the high school experience. So it can be part of your process, and we can probably answer some questions about that tonight. But enjoy your classes, enjoy your clubs, enjoy your friends, enjoy all these activities, because we were talking earlier, and although it was maybe focused on college a little bit, we all sort of in some ways say, oh, we wish we could go back and do X, Y, Z. Because when you graduate high school, guess what? They're kicking you out. You're graduated. You're not coming back. So make sure to enjoy that experience both in and outside the classroom.
You don't have to move it.
Oh, okay.
We'll see. My name is Maria Frittata. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Colleges That Change Lives. And we work with small liberal arts colleges. So we're the ones that ask you to think beyond the schools that you might know today, and to be big and brave and bold and consider those other 49 states out there. We want you to just at least think about it, because even if it feels scary, thinking about it can help inform your search. So a lot of what the original author of the book, Colleges That Change Lives, wanted us to do was to think about this process differently. And Lauren Pope worked in higher ed. He wrote for the New York Times about education. He loved small liberal arts colleges. And so he wrote about them quite a bit. And he counseled a lot of families to think about this kind of school. And the reason he named the organization Colleges That Change Lives is because that's the message he heard, was this place was transformational. This place changed my life. I came back a better thinker, a better writer, better able to argue with others about what they believe, better able to explain what I believe. And that was the message he heard, and he really wanted us as a culture to think about this process as something that's about a student and finding a place where a student will thrive. Not so much getting the really cool bumper sticker for your car, or be able to say, my kid goes to X, and all the people that you know go, oh, ooh. There's a difference between the ooh and the oh. And we all hope that we're going to get the response on the ooh side. But that means that we get too focused on a very narrow band of schools. And what happens at that narrow band of schools is, because they are well known, they are perceived to be good for everyone, because they are considered good, they are perceived to be good for everyone, is then they become incredibly selective, and that makes this process harder on students. But if you are willing to expand your horizons a little bit, and to think about some other schools out there that would be really wonderfully excited to have students from Holy Trinity apply, and to have students look at them and think about it, you'd be amazed what's out there. I want to say a couple things about the liberal arts, and I'll turn you over to Rick. Liberal arts colleges do all the things you hope that a school will. They get a little bit knocked around in the press and the media when people talk about liberal arts colleges. So a couple of things I'd like to say. Number one, liberal arts colleges are not just for liberals. Huge misperception. Number two, liberal arts colleges include science. So there's a big perception that science is here on the Georgia Tech side, and over here the humanities, and they never come together. But liberal arts colleges, they will absolutely come together. And that's part of the joyful experience of preparing students to go out into a world where the expectation is not that you can do one thing, but that you can think about the connections, and you can think about the ways that problems can be solved creatively with good critical thinking. And that's exactly what a liberal arts college would do and should do and does do for a student.
Well, I completely agree, and I think that broad is such an important term, and hopefully the mentality that you all take as you go into this. To also kind of further expand that idea, I would also challenge you that we say this, and you'll hear a lot of times people say, like, the college admission process. And I hope that, a lot of y'all raise your hands to say you're juniors or sophomores. I kind of hope you'll start to get rid of that term and change it up a little bit. Because if you go to Google Images for process, you get a lot of, literally the first 8 images that come up are these cogs, these wheel cogs, right? And it makes it seem like it's very mechanical. And it makes it seem like there's just this linear path. And if you screw up, if you get 20 points lower, or don't do the formula right, or get a B minus, you're just gonna fall off of that third cog and you're screwed, right? Life is over and everything's going awry because you didn't follow the linear path. But if you go and Google image experience, then you get people standing up on high places, they're got a boat in the water and they're sort of navigating their way. And what I would hope is that as you go into this, it won't be process, but it'll be this idea of an experience. And you'll start to be broad and ask questions and not feel like you have to do it the way your older brother did it, or not do it the way that you saw someone from your calculus class do it, but say, you know what, I get to pick my own way through this, that there isn't a formula to a place, but it's more of an experience of discovering. And I actually think there's a lot of power in the college admission experience, just like there's transformative power in the college experience. And that would be my hope for you, is that actually during this you would ask big questions. And especially as juniors, I'm sure y'all just weathered the holidays, right? And we all have that aunt that we fear coming over, and probably always had. But especially when you're a junior, because she shows up, doesn't have much to talk to you about, and the one thing she's gonna say, before you even eat a biscuit, is, where are you thinking about going to college, right? And that question is this crescendo, especially at a place like this. Especially at a place where you are at a college preparatory school. It is a foregone conclusion. And so too few families in places like this who value education, who take AP classes, ask a better and important first question, which is, why do I even want to go to college? And backing that up a little bit to say, let me think about this. And what would help if you'll do that is then you can start asking other questions like, all right, well, here's why I want to go. Now, what are the places in which I do well? Maybe you've loved this experience, but you're ready for something a lot bigger. Maybe you've really enjoyed, not living in a city, but you want to kind of get to that point. But if you just focus on where, it's that's the fifth cog. And it's, always moving towards this specific place. And I hope that you'll see what Maria was describing, which is this really, one of the strengths of our country is our higher education landscape. We have so many choices and so many options, but people lean to the known, and they lean to what they see all around them. And I would hope that you will stay broad, as she described, and think of it as an experience where you actually learn a lot about yourself, so that when you show up, wherever that may be, it's not the end goal, that's it, I got here, but it's when you arrive wherever it might be, you already know a lot about yourself, and that's setting you on a great course for that new experience.
Amazing, thank you. So we're going to start with the questions now. So what is something that has surprised y'all in college admissions, changes, developments in the last 5 to 10 years? So what surprised you and why, and explain. Sorry, starting with the hard.
No, it's a good one. We're trying to be philosophical but interesting at the same time. That's the challenge. I think what's been interesting to watch is, in some ways, it's a hard trend, and I think it's what Rick was pushing back at, is that idea that high school is only to prepare you for college, and then college is only to prepare you for graduate school. And so what happens is you get to a certain age, like me and these younger people, but you get to a certain age and you're kind of don't wish it all away. And I think what has unfortunately happened is as colleges get more apps and become more selective, because they have to be, because when you become popular and you get more apps, you don't get more beds. It's not like each 100 applications comes with 3 beds, and so now you have more space for students. You just get applications and you still have the same number of beds and faculty and places to eat. And so I think that as we've become more schools have become selective, I think the conversation has been less about the joy of high school and the joy of going through this experience and having a joyful experience in college. It's really so much become about the anxiety of what to do more. And I really loved the conversation we had with your counselors, for those of you who are at Holy Trinity, when they talked about how they've tried to restructure the education here so that it is more about students having opportunity to enjoy and expand their experiences and not just push. Because there's many of us who have read the articles about 25-year-olds in our country having life crises because they have pushed so hard from K through 22, and now they're 25 and they're not sure what to push at and what to push for and what to push to, and then they just don't know. And I think that's a terrible thing for our culture, to put our kids in that position. And I think that that's the trend that really, in some ways, is the most bothersome. There are technical trends that are hard for us on the admission side, but I think that bigger question of what are we doing to our kids is a really important thing for us to stop and think about.
One thing that I think of is, and maybe this is over a longer period than 5 years, but certainly the technology has changed the way that students apply to schools, the ease of applying to schools, the ease of getting information about schools that are not within a 2 or 3 hour radius from your home. And so I think there's a lot of great things about that. You probably are aware of a larger cross sections of colleges and universities now than students were, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And so I think there are a lot of positives to that, but there can also be negatives. I think all of us, at least the three of us on this panel, and probably all your college counselors know as well, that the average number of applications that a student is submitting is just a big increase. I can't remember what the average is now, 8 or 9 I think, whereas 20 years ago it was 2.5 or something. Those aren't the exact numbers, but you get the idea. So again, I think there's a lot of benefit to widening, being broad, thinking about that liberal arts college that's out of state, or thinking about different settings and not just, although, I realize I'm the public university represented in state, but, not just think, oh, okay, well, I have 12 options, the 12 schools in the state of Florida that are public, and maybe the state college, and maybe the 1 or 2 private schools that are close. You have probably the knowledge and the ability to learn about so many other schools and find a niche. And then the other thing I would categorize as I'm saying here is there isn't one school. I think that's also the challenge with knowing about more and more schools, is you figure out, oh my gosh, there's 5 or 6 or 8 schools that I'm really interested in, and then how do I narrow that down, where maybe in the past when applying to 3 schools it was a little easier to do. So I think there's both positive and negatives, but I think that's something that I see is sort of with the internet, technology, common application, et cetera, the way students choose colleges have changed.
I'm not sure that this has necessarily surprised me, but back to the idea of a trend, and something that I think is really important, especially in Florida, where with your public system in particular, tests are definitely going to be a part of the equation. But test score optional. Schools that are not putting priority on tests because they've done the homework, they've done the research, and they've determined, at our institution, this particular test and this range of scores is not what is correlating to performance and success, be that GPA or retention or graduation rates. And so what you have seen, and particularly I would say in the last 5 years, is a real escalation in the number of schools around the country, typically and at least originally private schools. But now there's a lot of conversation. Just recently, the Indiana system, including University of Indiana, went test score optional. There's conversation in California about this as well, but there's about 1,000 schools, maybe plus, over 1,000 schools in the country now not using test scores to make their admission decisions. And if you go to fairtest.org, F-A-I-R test.org, up on the horizontal navigation, there's flexible test optional list, right? And you can just sort of click there and see all these schools. But if you're a student, or if you're here as a parent, representing a student, and you feel like, gosh, my son or daughter is such a good student, they take good classes, they make good grades, they have a ton to offer, but testing is just not their thing. It's not representative of their capabilities and potential. Consider that list, because you will find, I worked at Wake Forest University, which is one of these schools, and there's a wide range of schools geographically, size-wise, mission-wise, that are there. And I'll just say this, literally today, my wife and I were having this conversation because our daughter, who's in 3rd grade, tested to get into what they call E-squared, which is like, just another name for gifted or something like that. And she didn't get into it, right? And we were having this exact conversation of like, she could do it. And if she got into that particular program, like, she would be absolutely fine. But, apparently she didn't answer enough questions on one sub-score for her to qualify, and all this. My wife's getting really anxious and sort of, wound up about it. And I was just thinking, this is why we as parents need to kind of be able to kind of help our son or daughter to have like a framework and a perspective to say, like, look, this is one small metric. And there's a lot of places out there that, that's not going to determine your ability to come and plug in and ultimately succeed on these.
All right, how would y'all advise a student on trying to find a college that's the best fit for them? You've alluded to it a little bit in what you've said, but if you had a student sitting in front of you with their parent, how would you advise them in trying to figure out what is their best college or best fit?
I would maybe, again, echo a little bit what Rick has already said, and sort of, start with the question, why do you want to go to college? And sort of start with yourself first and not the college first. So I would say that's the first step of finding the fit college, is figuring out what's important to you. Is it major? Is it location? Is it campus feel? Is what are the priorities? And what is a top priority, and what is I'd like this but I can live without it priority? And so I sort of try to start with those things, really looking internally at yourself and knowing yourself, and certainly consulting with parents and family members who maybe have a third-party view of you, of yourself, and sort of start that way, and then look at the schools. Because I think sometimes when students find themselves in the wrong fit, it's because they started with the school. And again, alluded to a little bit earlier that, I know this school is good, it must be good for everyone. That's not always the case. So that would be my first piece of advice, is sort of start with yourself, start internal, and then look external. And then I think the thing that you'll hear from anyone who works in an admissions office is, if you are able to visit the campus, we know obviously if you're hopefully visiting Florida, it's not too far away, you can do that. If you're interested, in a school in Oregon, that might be harder to get to. But go to campus, do the standard tour, but also go off script. If you know someone who goes to that school, have lunch in a dining hall, go to a space where students are mingling, a student union, those types of things. I think there's a lot of benefit to going on an information session, the tour, for example, that we offer at UF. But I think there's also a lot of benefit for you doing your own thing for an hour or two on campus.
I would look here first. And for students, you can do this, and no one has to know you're doing it, so it doesn't have to become a family activity if you don't want it to be. But you can think about things you like at this school. Think about the 3 things you like most. And then think about the 3 things that you like least. And those are good places to start, because you want to replicate that which you like, and you want to avoid, if possible. Now, if the thing you don't like is going to class, you can't avoid that one. But if you don't want to be in a community where everyone is from where you are, so then you need to look at institutions that have a broader scope. They have a broader population. They have international students, kids from many more states than just Florida. So you want to think about what you like and don't like here, And then that can be a great starting place for things that you want at other institutions, at your next step. And the other thing I would say is, think about where you've made your best friends. So we've talked a lot about our kids today already, but I have a 5-year-old, 5 and a half, and he has a best friend that they've met in kindergarten. So if they stay best friends forever, this is a terrible example. If they don't, and he's a nice boy, so I'm okay if he stays friends with Kyle, but if you can look around and say, well, I made all my best friends through theater because we stayed up late to put the tape on the stage for the marking, and we built the stage, and then we figured out the lighting, and we had to make costumes, and then the costumes fall apart, and we had to put them back together, and then I got all my friends to go, and then I made tickets, and I sold tickets, and I put up posters, and that's where you made your best friends. When you go to campuses, look around and see what they do in theater. You might not major, it might not be your life's work, but if it's something that you've enjoyed, and you look around and say, oh, that's a cool play, oh, they're doing that, oh, they have an improv group, that's kind of fun. If you do that, other people who point at those same 3 things will have commonality with you, and you'll start to build a community. It's easy in some ways if you're an athlete, or if you're, say, you're really into community service, or you're very connected to the religious piece of education, because then you have people to meet right easily. But otherwise, start to think about how you made your friends so that you can make another set. It's not that you have to give these up. It's not a one or the, it's not an either-or situation. But as you go forward, that's going to be one of the best parts about the college experience, typically, is that group of people that you meet. So how will you find them?
I would echo everything that my colleagues said. The other thing I would add, I guess, is try to get as many different people's opinions as you can. Never take one person's opinion as gospel truth, especially not someone who works in the admission office. They're going to show up here, and everything's great, man. And kids are making friends, and they're studying abroad, and they found 3 other friends and a professor and started the juggling club, and everybody studies abroad, and this and that. And your job is to kind of cut through some of the crap, right? So, because especially you all that are juniors, like, you're right now getting friggin' blitzkrieg by colleges. I really truly hope you are recycling. I mean, right now, if you remember nothing from this entire presentation, one word, recycle, all right? We can save the world one college brochure at a time together. Because, we don't make it easy on you. We send you all this stuff, and hopefully that's a reminder to you that there are 4,000 schools in our country. Hopefully it's a reminder that you have a lot of choices or options, but they all look the same, and kids are happy, and they're always sitting around under a tree with a professor, and the football team is always winning, which for us is a hard picture to get. Photoshop that one in. And we don't show you the kid that just failed an exam, or the squirrel that's dead, or whatever. And so what I would tell you is get lots of opinions. Talk to people that just graduated from that school. Use your Holy Trinity alumni base. I mean, these people sat in the same pre-calc class that you did, and they were from your community, and now they're at whatever school you're considering. Like, they also don't speak gospel truth to the corner on the market of that particular school, but they can give you an invaluable perspective. And I think that's one of the real benefits of attending a school like this is you do send people to lots of different places. Like, use that. And as Charles was mentioning, I mean, if you have the opportunity, and hopefully when you have the opportunity to go to these schools, I like to say loiter appropriately. All right? So, sit down in like a main thoroughfare, whether it be a dining hall or a student center or just like a place a lot of kids are walking through. Pretend like you're looking at your phone or reading a paper, and just listen and watch. And just sort of see, like, are these my people? What are they talking about? You gotta come to Georgia Tech, you need to be comfortable with people walking around with like formulas on their shirt, and math trees where like this guy taught that guy, whatever. So, are these my people? Those are some of the ways that you can kind of get to, if you're asking a lot of people the same questions and you're hearing themes, all right, then you know that this is a trend. This is what this place is really about. Instead of the person that shows up here for their college visit, and they've been to 8 other schools that day, and they're just eating granola bars and staying in Hampton Inns, and they just say the same thing one time after another, and it's the same spiel, right? And they're going to tell you, of course we have a great biology program, you know? But your job is to try to get past that and really get at the culture. The other thing you can do is use social media. You do not have to follow the accounts of these schools. And in fact, the better thing to do, and as my colleagues were saying, like if you're really passionate about drama, and go to that school's Instagram for what they're doing in theater, because they don't know you're looking, right? The admission office knows you're looking. We're infographic you to death, man. Everything's perfect. We definitely Photoshop that stuff too, all right? But with filters, everything you can do. The drama club does not know that you are looking, right? They're just putting out the real story. Alumni magazines are great, and student newspapers. That stuff's all online. That they don't think prospective students are looking. So you should be looking at that. That tells you a big, broader story about the culture of that place.
Excellent. Going to get to a few more technical type questions. We had quite a few questions about GPA. So can y'all explain the difference maybe between a high school GPA and then what y'all do with the GPA in order to determine admission and all of that?
Yeah, so for the state university systems, schools, which UF is one of, we have a pretty common way of recalculating a GPA. So first of all, we will look only at core academic courses. So elective courses are not calculated in our GPA. So gym, art, driver's ed, etc. Please do well in driver's ed, but we are not going to calculate that into your GPA. So what we will do is core subjects like English, math, science, social studies, and world language. And so those areas, we use a 4.0 scale. If you are in an honors course, we will add plus 0.5 to it, so an A 4.5, B 3.5. If you're in an AP, IB, Cambridge ACE course, or dual enrollment course, you get plus 1, so an A is a 5, B is a 4, etc. And so we recalculate that GPA. If you go to our website or any of the SUS institutional websites, you can usually get statistics on average or middle 50% GPA. Again, I talked a little bit earlier in my opening about how there's more context beyond the GPA. Now, certainly, if your GPA is well below that range, you can probably feel that maybe I won't be competitive for that campus. But know that if you're in the ballpark, it doesn't mean that, yes, hey, I'm in the middle 50%, I am in, or I'm even above the middle 50%, I am absolutely in, because it's one part of the process. And the other thing that I would say is we also look at it in context, because I don't know how many high schools there are in Florida, but safely say hundreds, probably over 1,000. And every high school has seemingly a slightly different curriculum and course offerings and those types of things. So we know that some students will have the opportunity to take more honors or AP courses. Some schools with their structure will sort of more regiment how courses are taken. Some students will do a high school AA through and complete their associate's degree while they're in high school. So we know the GPAs are going to look different at different schools on that recalc based on the curriculum at the school. So that's another piece of context that we look at. It's not just, okay, what's that GPA? Okay, decision, done. It's a little more nuanced than that, but that's how the GPA is calculated, and it can give you a sense of how competitive you are.
Okay. So we do not recalculate GPAs. Basically, we take whatever the school says the GPA is and plug that into our system. So if you give a weighted GPA, we'll put that in. If you give an unweighted GPA, we'll put that in. If you give both, we'll put both in. Because when we read, and I speak for a lot of schools, I think, in saying this, we go school by school. And so, you sit there and you're like, all right, we're going to be reading in the Space Coast today. We're going to start with Holy Trinity. The person who represents this school from our staff is going to say, let me tell you a little bit about this school. Now, here's where it's located. Here's a little bit about kind of the history of it. Here's, they're on an AP curriculum. Whether or not you limit the number of school, particular tests, not tests, but courses you can take each year, all the details, right? And then they're going to kind of walk through, like, here's the grading scale. And so the idea is we're trying to get context. We're trying to understand, in this school, what did you have access to, and what did you take? So in a way, it doesn't really matter what your grading scale is, because I guess to Charles's point, like, it's all over the map. I mean, in your state, it's all over the map, let alone all over the country and in the world. So you can't say, oh, you need a 3.9, because some schools are on a 5.0 scale, or like I was at Ransom Everglades in Miami, they're on a 13.0 scale. So you tell some kid, hey, you need a 3.9, he's like, sweet. All those C's are really paying off. So I think what you find is that a lot of these, two things. First, ask the question, right? Because you've just already seen it kind of depends from one school to the next. But then also, the idea is that, particularly I guess at more selective schools, like they're going to essentially be saying, where did you go? What could you have taken? What did you take? And then how did you get there? So we looked, as was kind of referenced, I think, trends. You started out in the 9th grade, and this goes back to, Maria was talking about like, ooh, or what was it? Ooh. I think that I have another one that's kind of like that with grade trends, which is you come into the 9th grade and it's like, oh man, I gotta study. And so it didn't go that well. 9th grade was kind of a disaster, but then 10th grade you started to kind of figure it out. 11th grade you're good, right? And then there's like, I got this. 9th grade, it's like, that kid's like, oh, this is easy. And then 10th grade doesn't go so well, right? Dating, driving, starting to go down. So the other kid who got it together is escalating grade trend. Now you got the kid who comes in, kills it 9th grade, and then dating, driving, not so good sophomore year, dating more, driving faster junior year, it's really going down. Just hanging on, right? Hanging on for a 3.7 versus the other kid that rises to it. So that's what we're doing, is we're having a conversation around the story of the transcript. What could you have taken? What did you take? What choices did you make? How'd you get there? Whether you're on a 13.0 scale or a 4.0 scale or numerical scale, it's kind of all over the map. Schools are starting to use emojis now. It just, but our idea is, how'd you do in the context you had?
I really want to read a transcript in emojis.
Math.
Tears.
Head explode. The monkey. That's the admission person.
That's right. So I want to make this worse, basically. So I worked at 2 institutions. I worked at Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, and Eckerd College in St. Pete. And at one, we did this, and at one, we almost did that. So just to make it more complicated, when I worked at Clark, and things change over time, but when I worked at Clark, we counted the 5 basic academic areas, and we added in computer science, music, theater, programming, things like that, only if they were at the honors level or higher. So just to make it more complicated, we just added them in certain places. And we did not give any weight. We did not add any weight into the calculation. When it came to Eckerd, we counted everything on the transcript. We did recalculate, but we counted everything, all the grades. And when I asked my boss, because I thought that was weird, technical admission charm, sorry. And when I asked John, he said, I think it's really important to respect everything the student does, because everything the student does takes time and energy. And I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it. And when I first got to Eckerd, I was there for 6 years. When I first got there, we recalculated the GPA with all the grades, but we didn't give any weight to anything. And then as we thought about it some more, and we recognized that we wanted to recognize the student's effort in taking an AP and IB, a dual curriculum, a dual enrollment class, we started adding weight in at that point. Now I say that for 2 reasons. One is to show you 1, 2, 3, 4 possible answers, and to recognize that we in admission are inconsistent. And number 2, I do want to remind you that I've been gone from both of those institutions for a while, so I don't know if they do it exactly the same way now. And then number 3, because I said there were 2, I'll make 3. We have to remember that there are students who homeschool. There are students who go to schools that do evaluative narratives. So when you ask for the grades, what you get is actually a paragraph or 2 or 3 from a teacher. And it's really interesting what you see in there. A B is a B. in some ways. A B tells you that they did good work, but not stellar work, if you want to look at it that way. And if you got B's, it's okay. Please don't panic, because I use the words not stellar. Please. B's are fine. But if you get a narrative, you get something very different. The narrative will say things like, you know, Rick did a great job with all of the very practical work, all of the tests he had to work on himself, but he did not play well with others. And he did not do well in our collaborative work in the class. And so that tells you something. And at this end, then it might end with, as much as he did well here and he struggled there, the thing I want to say most is that he was an amazing writer. And so you get a really different perspective when you get a narrative. And so there's 27,000 plus high schools in this country. Just in this country. And actually, while I said that, a charter school started somewhere. So, I mean, sometimes they pop up really fast. So there's more than 27,000 plus now. Everybody does it differently. And my colleagues who are still at colleges are incredibly thoughtful and incredibly careful. And so please know that someone is out there, as Rick said, as an advocate for you, for whatever school you're at, Holy Trinity or any of the other kids from other schools here, that you have an advocate. And that person's role is to really help everyone in their office understand your institution, your experience at that institution, and then will you do it? Can you do the work? Are you a good fit? And if we had to all narrow it down to 2 sentences, can you do the work? Are you a good fit?
One thing, just to hit on that a little bit more, is, you know, I think what Maria was saying too is, like, ask when you're taking the time and spending the money to go visit these campuses, or when these people do come, you know, you're fortunate to go to a school where a lot of people will come through. Again, don't let them just like pull that cord in the back and start going, right? They will Charlie Brown you to death. They said the same thing 30 minutes ago at the school down the street. Stop them and ask them questions, right? They would rather that anyway. They'd rather have a conversation anyway. And ask particular questions. How do you recalculate? How do you recalculate? What courses do you bring into that? And then like they'll throw out numbers too. You know, like they'll give you a number like, you know, our faculty student ratio is 17 to 1. And that number, you should not envision yourself with 16 of your best friends sitting around, you know, with a professor learning American history. There's a lot of sort of junk in that number. There's professors that are on sabbatical. There's people that, you know, teach one class. Like, ask questions. Hey, I'm going to be a chemistry major at your school. You know, what's the average class look like for chemistry majors? And is that true? You know, how does that look in my first year, and how does that look in my senior year? Because that will vary, even from, I'm sure, you know, at University of Florida, this is definitely true at Georgia Tech. Like, you take a physics major, and then you take like a computer science or a mechanical engineering major, and while their first year may look relatively similar, very different, you know, in the end. You've got kids in the upper level physics classes with like 4 other kids, you know? And then meanwhile, those mechanical engineering or computer science classes still have 60 or 70 kids, even though on paper, we're 19 to 1, I think, in our ratio. So ask your questions. If they take you on a tour and you don't get to see something that's really important, like build in time to go see it on your own. Don't let them just dictate the information. And it's not nefarious, but it's generally efficient, right? They have a certain amount of time to get through a lot of information. But your job in going through and making a big decision about where you're going to ultimately go is to make sure you know the things that matter to you and whether or not you're lining up with that place.
Excellent. We talked about GPAs a little bit, we've talked about testing a little bit and finding the right fit. Can you guys go into a little bit of detail, and again, you've alluded to this some, but go into a little detail of things that y'all are looking at beyond a statistical piece of information, like you talked about, you know, the overall story that a transcript would tell. But any other factors that, you know, students that are trying to kind of figure it out, what might be important, you know, to have 50 extracurriculars or one that you spend a lot with, those types of things.
I can start. I'll shake it up and go first. I would say that it would probably surprise a lot of people how quickly we get past the numbers. because in a lot of cases, test scores are pretty strong, and students have taken good classes, and they have done well. And so when you get into looking beyond the numbers, the conversation that often happens in these committee rooms and between people that are making the decisions is, I think it comes down to basically like 3 I's, which is involvement, right? That you have been taking your time to do more than just be a good student. Because while we are judged and ultimately trying to ensure that the students that come to our campuses can do the work, right, and that they're capable of doing the work when they get there, we also want to make sure that they are enhancing the community and that they are going to make, just like here, like the reason people love this school is because it's way more than just the experience in the classroom. You know, it's all the stuff that goes on in the space between the classes. And that's what makes it, you know, a place that people want to be part of. And that's the same with any of these campuses that are out there as well. So, you know, that people are taking their time to do things beyond just being a good student, that they're having an impact, that in some way you can see that their involvement hasn't just been like box checking. Yep, I was in the French club. Yep, I was in the Beta club. Yep, I did that also. But there is some type of involvement that led to impact. And then the other one, and kind of similar to impact, is influence. And I think this is important because you do not have to hold an office in a club or be the captain of a team to have influence. There's a lot of ways and a lot of things you can be involved with that will lead to that. And my opinion is that while college admission people may not put it this way, essentially what they're asking is, you know, will this student be missed when they leave? That's kind of what we want to know. And you can be missed in a lot of ways. It could be your boss, right? Because you've worked there for 4 years and they've given you more responsibility and they are going to really miss you, you know, when you leave. Or it's that coach, right? Who you've been so reliable and just so consistent. You're good for the other people. You weren't the captain, but you have just been like the glue that holds that team together. You're going to be missed. That coach is dreading, you know, graduation. And so I think what you're trying to do when you fill these applications out is demonstrate that, yes, hey, I've taken my valuable time to be involved with these things. I've had an impact on the people around me, and when I go, you know, I'm going to leave a hole, but I'm going to bring with me all that I've learned from this, and I'm going to be a factor, a positive influence on your campus as well.
Yeah, I would echo everything that's been said, and also add that, you know, when we're evaluating, you know, activities and essays and those types of things, we're doing our best to evaluate things, again, that aren't clear from the academics or not apparent from the academics. And some of those, quite honestly, are hard to do because they can often be sort of a little bit of those soft skills. You know, I sort of think about it, you know, if you're applying for a job, you know, your resume might have the, you know, sort of academic, it has the, you know, maybe where you went to school, your past experiences, et cetera. But the, you know, the interview, if you're interviewing for a job, you're sort of talking about, you know, are you reliable? Do you, you know, grit is a popular word right now with sort of, you know, stick-to-itiveness, ability to adapt, work with others, those types of things. So there's sort of these soft skills which mean that you're having an impact where you are now and will have an impact on our campuses. Because I think, you know, almost every college, and probably every college will say, that, you know, we want students who do more than go to class, right? And I would say to you as students, you know, if when you go to college, if all you're doing is going to class, you're probably not getting everything out of the experience if you could. So whether that's through having a job, having an internship, being involved in the theater, we've talked about a lot of these things. And so I think we try to get a sense of that through the activities, through the essays, so sort of these soft skills, these things again that maybe don't show up on a, you know, on a GPA and a test score and a course is taken. And again, and schools are going to look at this and evaluate this different ways. Schools that take letters of recommendation are going to, you know, use sort of those things. We talked a little about narrative evaluations, and so they're trying to, generally speaking, glean those things from the things that you're providing. So, you know, my advice, again, sort of I said in the beginning, is do the things that you're passionate about, that you're interested in, that benefit your family and your community and your school, that are very interesting to you, and you're going to be able to not only show us in an application that you've done that, but I think you'll have a more fulfilling experience right now in high school. So again, don't forget that your high school experience is super important, and so it will help you in the admissions process, but hopefully also enhance your experience right now.
Just a couple of quick things about the essay, because everybody's thinking, what about the essay? What about the essay? Your essay is going to be read. I always hope it will be read recognizing that you are 17, you are not a professional writer, and someone has told you these are the 650 most important words you'll ever write in your life. And that's not necessarily true. But they are trying to see if they can hear your voice a little bit in the essay. They are trying to get a sense of who you are and how well you write. You do need to remember that you cannot take on everything in 650 words. You cannot take on hunger in America in 650 words. You cannot take on a big social issue in 650 words. But you can give them a glimpse into your life. Just a glimpse of how you approach the world. And that's what I always liked about the essays. I still remember, after all these years, I got a little glimpse of who that kid was and how they approached the world. And that was very, very helpful. Two small things. Number one, you do not have to use all the SAT words you study in your essay. I remember reading season. We call it reading season, which makes it seem like we don't read anything outside reading season. But reading season, let's say November to February, and you would get more plethora and more myriads than in the whole other 8 or 9 months of the year. You don't have to say that. Sometimes you can just say a lot, and that's okay. It's okay. You're really, again, trying to give a glimpse of who you are. This is how I used to think about it when we used paper applications. The way I thought about it was if I dropped a packet of 10 apps on the floor, and I picked up the essays and all the pieces and I started putting them back, what I would always hope, though, is if I put a student's essay in the wrong folder, that it felt like it was in the wrong place, because it should be specific enough to that student that it needs to be with the rest of them. It has to be that personal piece that's of the rest of them.
And we are in reading season now, for sure. And so, our staff's, I'm just hanging out at the beach, but our staff is back there reading. One thing I would be curious to ask you is, especially y'all that are juniors, and I think there were some seniors in the room as well, when you envision who's reading, who comes to mind for you? Like when you were seniors or juniors, I guess, like when you're sitting there writing and you're thinking like, when I hit submit, like who's on the other side of this? What's the image that you have? Who do you think that is? What do they look like? It's not rhetorical.
Drowning in papers.
Drowning in papers. All right, yeah. Just like reams of paper coming at them. Lot to read. Anyone else? You either don't know, don't care, or haven't thought about it. That's fine. Anybody have a thought of how old this person is, what they're wearing, what gender they may be? Yes? About 23? Is that what you said? Okay. Others? Yes? Really bored and wants to go home? Okay. All right. Anyone else? All right. So a couple things. Average age nationally of the first reader, right? First person to read is about 26. So you're not too far off. Now I know if you're 17, you're sitting there going, man, that is friggin' old. How is that person still alive? But that's good that you were more on that track, because a lot of times you hear people describe someone who's, they're like, they're in their late 50s. It's a guy that's got like tweed jacket on and patches and sitting in this like oaken room with like maybe a robe, like a judge's robe, and just like a pen in one, red pen, and he hates you, He's just like looking for a comma splice. Cannot wait. That's the thrill of his day is finding a comma splice. And listen, that is so not true. First of all, 26, like that person babysat you when you were in 3rd grade, They know what Instagram is. They wear like North Face vests, They're just people that walk dogs. And they do read a lot of essays. And so here's the good news for you. And I hope you'll remember, whether you're a senior still working on these, or maybe you've already submitted and you haven't heard back, or if you're a junior as you go into it and you start working on this, because I think this is where the anxiety comes from, is like my whole life hinges on 650 words. What I want you to remember is every single time, I promise you, every single time they open an application, they want it to be good. They want your essay to be good. They are in your corner. And here is how you know that as a human being. When was the last time you went to a movie and you paid like $18 to get in there and $15 for popcorn and double that to San Francisco?
That's correct.
And you're like, I hope this movie sucks. Like I just want to waste my time and money. Right? Or you buy a book and you're like, I hope this is terrible. I'm just really looking to fall asleep. Nobody does that. No human being does that. And so they're in your corner. They want it to be good. And your job is just to keep them there, to give them something that's personal, to give them something that's yours, to give them something that they can kind of see and latch onto. And so I hope you'll kind of keep that in mind and not be, a lot of times students are so nervous about this, but I think that's because you don't think that the person on the other side like starts out with you and is for you, really. So hopefully you'll take that as you write these.
Great. We're going to take the next 20 minutes or so and open it up to the floor. So we got Mrs. Pagan with the microphone, and I know y'all had a lot of questions. We didn't get to all of them, but we're hoping that some of these responses generated a few more questions. So.
Hi there. My question is actually about the essays. I'm curious, especially at a high volume school like Georgia Tech or UF in particular, how many people actually look at that essay? How long do they spend reading it? And does someone else look at it again if they think it's good, or if they don't, if they think it's so-so, does it just go in a pile over there? I really want to know the inside scoop.
I'll start. We use a method of reading, I guess, called, a lot of people call this committee-based reading, CBR, committee-based review. Ours is actually PBR, which is a whole different acronym, but it's partner-based reading. And basically, it's when two people sit down, and one is working on the academic side, test scores, GPA, all this. And then the other person's looking at extracurriculars and essays. And on average, they're taking first read about 8 to 10 minutes to read. So I've got the essay, supplement, and extracurricular. And then my partner has your transcript, grade trends, performance, and all that. We come together, we say, look, from an academic side, this student's great. And the other person's like, well, that's good, because it's kind of terrible outside the classroom. So one person might say admit, and the other person says defer, deny, right? If they disagree especially, it's going to get moved into the next layer. And some get moved into the next layer for various reasons. So there's another set of people reading. We also have faculty review, so that's another layer that occurs. So I would say at minimum, an application will be read by 2 people, and that's pretty rare. More commonly, you see 4 to 5, and then in some cases, even more than that.
Yeah, in our process, it's a little different, but every applications, we also in a different mechanics split the application between academics and sort of the extracurricular essay pieces. So the extracurricular essay pieces get read a minimum of 2 times by 2 people, and if those people come to different conclusions, it's read by a 3rd person. So everyone gets twice, many get 3. And then the sort of non-academic piece is then paired with the academic piece, and then that's when a decision recommendation is made at that point. And there's 3 steps in our decision recommendation process, and sort of very similar to how Georgia Tech works. We have the person who travels and has that recruitment territory is the first person to review the whole application. Then it goes to a committee process, and then it goes through our final sort of leadership team process. Not every file gets all the way. There might be some files that get a final decision, before it gets to the sort of final high level committee decision, but that's sort of the process. So essay read minimum of 2 times after it's all together, the whole application is read at least once. So it's 3 people minimum are seeing it, oftentimes 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 44,000 last year. It's more this year. I'll be able to tell you at the end of the year how many we have. Correct. Yep. And so there's people in our office, and then we do what a lot of other schools do. We also employ people who are trained and read part-time for us. Some of them are former employees in our office. Some of them are retired teachers and counselors. So we do have a part-time staff that assist us with the reading, and that's not every school does that, but a lot of schools of our volume do that.
I will say though that when I worked at 2 schools, and for us, if you were an experienced reader and the student was clearly admissible, especially when I worked at a rolling admission school where decisions went out as they were made, if the student was clearly admissible, there were no flags, everything looked good, and you were an experienced reader, it got read, and a person got a letter. Because we knew statistically it was more likely if the student applied early and was admitted early that they would enroll and they would stay. So for us, it was advantageous to move it out quickly. But new readers, anybody with any kind of unclearness at all, went to a second reader, at least a second reader.
I was just going to add another question to ask, right? At the schools you go to, how do you review? It's a great question to ask.
So, do you recommend graduating with your AA degree in high school or going through the AP course?
So I'll tackle that. So really, that's a decision that a student and a family with their teachers and counselors should make, and not someone in an admissions office should make for a student. What I would say is that there are students who come to UF with the AA and enjoy the process, and it was the right fit for them. There are other students who that's not the right fit. The one thing I would sort of just make sure that you're aware of if you're doing an AA, particularly, or even if you're just taking dual enrollment classes, that begins your college GPA. So if you're taking a dual enrollment class as a sophomore, that will be on your transcript wherever you go for forever. So if you do well, fantastic. But if you don't do well, that poor grade in an introductory math course may affect you down the line if you want to pursue a STEM degree or something like that. So I would say students who are interested in families who are thinking about doing an AA or doing a lot of dual enrollment course, even if not finishing the AA while in high school, just keep that in mind. Because for the most part, wherever you go to college, your high school grades, once you're admitted, once you're enrolled, they're gone. It is never on your transcript. We don't print your test score on your transcript. We don't print your high school GPA on your transcript. It's gone. But your dual enrollment courses will be on your transcript forever. We get to grade forgiveness policies, but so there are some, so maybe I'm being a little too stark with the forever thing. But I'd say that's the biggest difference. And also, for some students, the goal might be to graduate early or those types of things. For some students, whether that's academically or sort of socially and maturity-wise, graduating at 19 or 20 from college may not be the right choice. Maybe graduating at 21, 22, 23 may be better for a lot of reasons. So that's the other thing that I would consider as you're looking at an AA. But again, I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's a decision that's best made, with the family in consultation with the student.
May I?
Yeah.
May I? You know what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Rick and I did this last night. One thing I would say, and this is my own personal soapbox item, if you choose to do an AA because your goal is to finish college quickly, please remember that if you graduate at 19, can you hire them? He can't hire you. He can't hire you for a job that you feel you'd be qualified for because you have a bachelor's degree, because he cannot send you on the road. He can't get you a hotel room. He can't get you a rental car because you're under 21. So there's a very practical consequence that comes with the students who want to push through really quickly. And sometimes it's the kids who are even a little bit younger and they're very capable. And so they figure, I'm going to be done in high school at 17. I'm going to have 2 years to finish up because I did my AA. I'm going to be 19. I'm going to have a bachelor's degree. I'm going to be ready to take on the world. The world is not ready for you yet. I said this at a program, I was telling these guys at dinner, I said this at a program in Reno one time, and it's a group of students who accelerate very quickly, and they haven't invited me back. and I know why, because nobody liked that answer. But the reality is, if you have a bachelor's degree, you want a job commensurate with that bachelor's degree. But there are things you cannot do until you are 21. And so they can't hire you and put you on the road. For example, now you might not want to be an admission counselor. Extrapolate out with me. You know, that's a challenge when you are too young in some ways. So I want to tuck that in there for you to think about. You can all be mad if you're doing the AA. I can take that. I can accept it. But I think it's important to just remember that tiny practical piece right there.
Hi, so I have a child who is likes science and wants to go MIT and Georgia Tech and very good at it, but she's also fully trilingual, and her counselor pushes her to take the biliteracy seal, which is that's the biliteracy seal for her high school diploma, and she can take it in 2 more languages, French and Russian. But she wants to go to a science school. She wants to be a scientist. Does that give her any advantage when you see a biliteracy seal on the high school diploma for a child who's clearly capable with 4 languages, but doesn't want really to pursue that and wants to go into science? Does it give her any additional advantage, or it just?
I think, well, actually, in some ways, this correlates to the previous question also, I think, because, again, you think about what are the conversations that colleges are having? What are those committee conversations? And really, it is, again, what did the student kind of have access to, and what did they choose to take? And back to the dual enrollment, you can take some not impressive courses in dual enrollment, and then you can take some very stretched classes. Similarly to your question, yes, I think as I hear that, that sounds like a really kind of robust path. It sounds like there's been a lot of exposure and experience and preparation, in addition to what's happening in the sciences as well. So I think that probably the conversation around that student would be, this is impressive. This is definitely something that we see value in. So I certainly wouldn't say it has any type of negative implication whatsoever.
And if I could just add something real quick, I think sort of about any of these topics, which is fine, and we're talking about, I think, small slices of the admissions process, and that, the question, I get, or many of us have probably gotten, well, should I do A or B? Whatever A or B is. And A or B might, and I'm making a percentage, might account for 2% of the admission decision. I'm just making that number up. But if you just isolate one thing by itself, in holistic admissions, that's sort of not how it works, because we're looking at the whole thing. So it's very possible that, for taking, doing A or doing B, no matter what you do, you might get the same admission decision. So I know, the general advice, for example, is, take a very rigorous course load. But if you ask me about one single course and what should I do with this one single course, it's hard to give specific advice because, again, we were having a conversation at dinner about, does a particular course that your admission decision probably does not hinge on that one individual thing when we're looking at your whole application. It's all the little things together.
I believe in the radical idea that students should do things that they care about and then find colleges that respect and appreciate that. I think that's I wish we sort of talked about it, and I think that's what people have said, but I wish that as a culture we talked about it that way. You know, kids will drive themselves way too hard to do things that they think are going to advantage them, but they don't have any joy in it. And don't we want our kids to have some joy? Just because we didn't have joy in high school doesn't mean they should.
I was wondering, what were some of the most outside the box, but like simultaneously positive things you've seen people do in the pursuit of a college admission?
Ooh. We got an essay in haiku one year. It took about 5 of us to create an answer in a haiku because we wanted to respond to the student because it was kind of cool, but it took a bunch of us a long time to get it together. And when the kid wrote a limerick, we were like, no, we can't do it. No, we just can't do it, it's too hard. Too much staff time.
I still have a folder in my desk of a girl that was on the wait list. And it was like, I think she found out that we had like 577 students on the wait list. And so she wrote the 577 reasons why we should admit her. Her name was Vet Vandiver. And I met her recently. She's a Georgia Tech graduate. So we did in fact pull her off the wait list, even though one person in my office thought that was super obnoxious that she sent in the 577 reasons. I was like, no, if we admit her, she's coming. We need to fill this class. So Vandiver is in. But yeah, I mean, I thought that was, you know, because we talked last night at the program Maria and I were at last night about like demonstrated interest, which is, we're not going to get too much into this tonight, but it's this idea like, how much is it that colleges are sort of looking at, you know, your interactions with them and whether or not they, you know, if they admit you, you'll come and stuff like that. And very few schools really are going down that road heavily of what they would call demonstrated interest. But when it comes to the wait list, I actually feel like there's a lot of schools where that really comes into play. And so one thing I just want to say, kind of pivoting on that a little bit is, you know, it is understandable for you to feel like, you know, if you get deferred from a school, if you get put on a wait list at a school, like, well, screw them, you know, they don't want me. And that's, again, not how it works, right? Like, we are managing a class and sort of, you know, trying to enroll the right number, because if we go too far over, you know, don't have enough beds to house everybody, or lines at Chick-fil-A are too long, or, you know, whatever it might be. And so what I would tell you is, if you get deferred or if you get waitlisted, you know, try to put your ego in a box a little bit and say, I'm going to see this thing through. This is back to where, like, process is really a thing instead of experience. Like, it is a process. You didn't sign up for just one round. You didn't apply only if you take me in the early action or early decision round. You said you were interested. You did your homework, you did your research, you understood why you were going, and you asked big questions, and you came up with this list of 6 or 8 places. See it through, you know? See it through. Hang in there with that defer, hang in there with that wait list if those are the places you really want to go. And if you'll do that, you're just putting yourself in a better, you know, chance of ultimately having that choice also.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I mean, at least at Florida and the places I've worked previously, you know, it's very well defined what we consider and what we don't consider. So it's a little hard to go too far out of the box because, you know, if you know, say, hey, here's a, you know, interpretive dance that you should look at for my admission, I'm probably not going to look at it. Again, a couple things that just stick in my mind. One was a memorable essay that was sort of written in list format, and somehow it worked. I don't know, and this was at my first institution I ever worked at, which was a small liberal arts, you know, college, and just the sort of creativity to still write a coherent essay in list format. I don't know if I encourage anyone to go out on that limb, because I think it might break, but that, and the other thing I'd say, I know you said positive, but on the other end, which I think is, which we get a few every year, is we get students who, in their essay, say, please don't admit me, because I don't want to go to your school, but someone in my life is making me apply. And it's not a large number. It's not like, oh, we get 1,000, but it's a couple, a few every year. And so those, I think we've again talked a lot about the search process, but also part of that process is having a discussion with your family members, whoever's, part of that process. And so if there's a school that someone really wants you to go at and it's not your school, it might be a very difficult conversation, but it's better to have it pre-application than post-application.
That concept goes for talking about money also. Like, money is hard to talk about and it can be uncomfortable, but man, if right now, if you're a family of a junior, I just can't tell you how much I hope that you will have some very real and honest conversations around, your limitations and some of your conditions about what you either can pay or what you're willing to pay, because of either the lifestyle you have or the amount of debt you're willing to take. Because unfortunately, what we've all seen and what will, for Charles and I still sitting in these desks, we'll see in April inevitably is, here's some kid, they're in your office, they've been admitted, they posted it on social media, they bought the t-shirt, and now the financial aid package has arrived, and they're having this conversation where mom and dad are kind of starting to draw lines and say, that's too much. And at that point, I just throw some tissues in there and leave, because I'm not qualified to handle that. But what I would just tell you is, if you're a family of a junior or an underclassman, you have an opportunity before you apply. It doesn't mean you can't go visit, and it doesn't mean you can't apply, because a lot of schools may have high price tags that through aid, bring it down to a reasonable amount. But have that conversation where you say, sweetheart, I love you. And I think Malibu is also beautiful, and Pepperdine looks awesome, But if 78 stays 78 a year, that's just not happening. But go ahead and apply, And if it comes down to 41, then you can do it. And that's fine, that's reasonable. But it's an early conversation. It's pre-application instead of post-admit, and there's a huge difference for family dynamics.
I talk to the computer a lot because I work at home alone, and so I'll read the article. And no offense to dads, but it's often the dad. Well, I paid for my own, and they can pay for their own. And then I ask them on my computer, really? Where are they going to make 50 grand? How many paper routes? How many part-time jobs? How many hours can a 17-year-old do to make that happen? Because it wasn't 50 grand when that dad went. And so I think that piece that Rick did is super important, to have that conversation and really, and it's hard because what do we tell kids? This is the biggest decision you'll ever make. This is the biggest decision. Well, they might get married, that's a big one. They might choose the military, that's a big one. They might move abroad, that's a big one. There's a lot of big decisions we make in life. But it really does have to be a conversation that says, we can do this much, and we can't do this much because we just can't. And so that gives them some opportunities. Now, what I would say then, sorry, thank you. May I use your hand? Okay, that's fine. There we go. So let's say this is an admitted class. This is the top of the class. These are the quote-unquote best students that they admitted. And this is the bottom. These are the kids who got in. And they're happy they got in, and everybody takes some of them here. And then there's a big bunch in the middle. If financial aid is extraordinarily important to your family, you want to look at the numbers at those schools. This is where the numbers help. Look at the GPA, look at the test scores, and then figure out if you're up here. Because if you are up here, you are more likely to get merit-based aid if they give merit-based aid. And if they only do need-based, and they don't fill everybody's need, they're going to fill more here and more here than they will here. because they will use their money to woo. They will woo a student. They will woo a stronger student. They will not woo as much here. Now, if the school says we need 100% for everyone, that tells you a different story. Everyone's going to get their need met. What the college believes their need is, not what you believe their need is. That's perceived need. What the college thinks you need. So if financial aid is incredibly important, you want to be here. You want to be above average. And that's in some ways about the simplest way to look at financial aid is where do you fall on this? Are you at the top or at the bottom or in the middle? Thank you very much. It's way easier to do that with someone else's arm. I do that by myself sometimes, but it's easier with someone else's arm.
And I think we have time for one more question, just because I know there's a lot of students in here and homework and stuff.
So if I'm planning on taking like a gap year to go to a religious college and then like go back and do my undergrad, does that look frowned upon, or like does it like hinder some of the like advantages of becoming like a right out of high school and a college student?
So I can start. Anyway, I can start. I would say most schools, again, it depends a little bit on what you're doing during the gap year, but for most schools, they will want you to apply in your senior year of high school if you plan to only take 1 year of a gap year. And then if you're admitted, contact the school and request a deferral for a year. And every school probably has a slightly different process, but you need to say, thanks for admitting me, these are the reasons why I'm looking to defer, and then they will let you know whether or not they can. For Florida and most of the public universities in the state of Florida, the key thing is if you take any classes, credit-bearing classes that would transfer in during that time. If you take more than 11, so if you take 12 or more credit hours, you are no longer a freshman in the state of Florida, you are a transfer student, and you cannot do that process and be considered a freshman, so you'd have to reapply as a transfer student. If you're taking a gap program and only taking like a class or two, and it's mostly, if it's religious oriented, if it's, more mission oriented or religious service or something like that, that's likely in most colleges. Again, I can't speak for everyone, but that's likely to be approved. Most colleges, again, maybe we'll hear some exceptions, will defer for up to a year. It's less common for them to defer your admission for more than a year.
Yeah.
I do think, if you tell a school I'm going to play video games for a year and then I'll be there next year, they're not going to give you the deferral. And you cannot defer and go to another school to see if you like it. That's like being engaged to two people.
Yeah, I really have nothing to add.
You don't want to go out to be engaged to two people, huh?
Man, we're done.
All right, we're just going to give an opportunity for each of our panelists to kind of, if you have any closing remarks, to kind of close us out.
I said earlier what I kind of hope for students, I think, is that you will stay broad. I think if you're going to start scratching words off, definitely myriad and plethora, scratch. Process, scratch. And the other one I hope that you'll take away is, like, this is my dream school, or this is my top choice. I really hope you will never say that, because, if there's 4,000 schools, and that's just in our country, right? Forget the fact that more Americans are going abroad now than ever before, but, if you apply to 6 or 8 schools, those should all be your top choice. Those should all be places. You did your homework, you figured it out, this is where you want to go, that you would be happy. You're the one that applied there. Our neighbor just the other day was like, I got in, but it's just the University of Tennessee. It's like, you applied there. Like, you took the time, you paid the fee, you're the one that chose that. Like, it's not just, you should celebrate that. So for students, I hope you will find all of your applications to top choices where you'll be happy and you're excited when you get in, and celebrate that. I think it's like 7% of the world's population ever even steps foot on a college campus. It is a privilege to go. You get admitted to a place, you should celebrate. Go out to dinner, buy yourself something, get excited about the work that you've done and the possibility you have. For parents, my biggest thing is you should talk to less parents of high school students about college admission and more parents of college students about college admission. Because high school parents know as little as you know, and they lie. They exaggerate and they gossip, and it's not healthy, and you need to get out of your echo chamber. College parents of college students who are recent college grads, you know what they always say? Like, first of all, they're never going to say, you know what we wish we had done? Is stressed more about this whole thing, right? They're going to say, oh, you know, he didn't, they're gonna have made the mistake. They're going to say something like, you know, he didn't get into his top choice, but he ended up going to this place, and man, it just has worked out so well. He got this internship, and he's dating this girl we actually like, and, you know, things are good. And that's the story you hear from them. So talk to more parents at a different stage. Just like you did when you had a 3-year-old and you were dealing with a problem, you talk to the parent of an 8-year-old, right, who had been kind of down that road. And you should be doing the same thing now.
I would say to not use the term safety school, because what we think of and call a safety school may actually be the school that resonated most with that student, that they really love the most. And so now what you're saying to them is, oh, I know you like that one, honey, but it's really the place you'll go if stuff doesn't work out. So how excited is that kid going to be coming back from the mailbox with the letter to the place I could go if things don't work out? Wait a minute. It takes a lot of the joy out of this. I absolutely agree. Apply to schools to which you want to go. If you don't want to go, don't apply. Don't apply.
Again, I would just echo that everything that's already been said, and there's just some great advice. I mean, I'm honestly pretty humbled to be up here with these two folks that Rick has literally written a book about college admissions. It has a great blog. Colleges That Change Lives is just a fantastic organization, and they have a lot of resources. So the last thing that I would say, just to add, is and this is all in hindsight, I didn't think it at the time, but the worst college advice I got when I was in high school, and it wasn't my aunt, but we can sort of say it was my aunt at the holiday time, was from a family member who told me, you should go to whatever the highest ranked college is you get admitted to. Worst advice I got, because I didn't actually go to the college that was highest ranked that I got into, and I probably would have been fine there, but again, it sort of goes back to the fit. It goes back to the, what's important to you. It goes back to the, just because it has a good school reputation doesn't mean it's good for you. And also sort of, sort of the culture that can build around these rankings. And I realize I'm saying this as an institution and as a state that touts rankings a lot. I understand that. But, don't get obsessed with rankings. That's what I'll say. Again, I don't know that I can add to anything else that was said, because it was probably better than I can articulate, but that's my one piece of advice that wasn't said.
Well, thank you so much to our 3 professionals that were here tonight. Thank you. And thank you all so much for coming tonight. I think we're going to stick around for a few more minutes, so if you have any questions you want us to follow up with, then please feel free. Otherwise, thank you and drive safe.